Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
The Public Affairs Research Council, PAR as it's commonly known, has an important history in the state of Louisiana as a research organization and a watchdog group of state government. Robert Travis Scott, president of the Public Affairs Research Council, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project. Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined by Robert Travis Scott. He's president of the Public Affairs Research Council, a very important organization with a 60-plus year history of doing good work in Louisiana. Robert, welcome.
Great to be here, and thanks for taking on these, not so easy subjects.
Well, we got a lot to talk about, specifically the work you're doing on an important task force, the work that PAR's doing. But one of the things we always like to do at the beginning of the show is get a little background. So tell us about your work history and the path that has led you to be president of PAR.
Well, I'm very privileged to be the president of the Public Affairs Research Council. Of course, we call ourselves PAR. That's what
right.
we've always been known as. And I became president in 2011. But yeah, I think I've had a great life and a great career life getting here. A lot of journalism background. I was a business editor for years, both in South Carolina, covering some great economic development stories that were going on when that state was really seeing a rebirth. And at the Times-Picayune, I was a business editor down in New Orleans for years. And then they moved me up to the Capitol Bureau in Baton Rouge, where I was the Capitol Bureau Chief, doing investigative reporting, policy work, and working as a journalist in the state capital of Louisiana is a great privilege because you have really terrific access to the governors and the legislators and so on. People there really want to talk and interact. And way before all that, I had a public policy background in Washington, D.C., little world travel. I've done a lot of really interesting things in life. It's been a good ride.
Well, and the background and the work experience and history really suit you well in the role, I believe, that you're in now. Let's give our viewers an overview of PAR, the Public Affairs Research Council, its history and its mission, and talk specifically about the watchdog role that you play?
Well, the Public Affairs Research Council, as you say, it's been around since 1950. And a lot of what we've done that's been really effective over the years is simply just shedding light on what the heck is going on. And this was back in those days when we first started, no one had a clue as to what was really happening. Everything was done in top secret format. And we just sort of helped open that up over the years. A lot of what we've done is educational. Where we try to educate the policymakers and the general public about really basic issues. Like, for example, the constitutional amendments. Every time those appear on the ballots in the fall, we are really the go-to place to help explain how this works.
Let me say something about that, because it's interesting that you mention that, because for all of my adult life as a voter, when constitutional amendments are on the ballot, I always look for PAR's recommendation in terms of what I want to do, and you have some information.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
Right.
I can't walk down the street without somebody saying thank you for the Constitutional Amendment Guide. But we go way beyond that. We have a lot of really good fundamental education pieces that we do on the state fiscal situation, on taxes, pensions, all these types of things. And then we go beyond that with recommendations. We do reports and commentaries that help provide guidelines for where we ought to go as a state, both in the near term and in the long term. And a lot of our policy reports take a very long-term view. And people say, well, you did a research report and you sat on the shelf. Well, let me tell you, when new politicians come into the office, what's the first place they go to figure out what's the best thing to do for the state? They go to our shelf.
Well, and one of the important things I believe, and one of the reasons that PAR has had such an important history and is so well respected by legislators and leaders both in government and business, is that everything you've done has been from an objective, research-based, nonpartisan perspective, right? You guys are, you're not Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal, you're looking at the facts.
I'm a registered independent. And as a journalist over the years, I've really tried to practice, a fair and balanced way of looking at things, and being fair and balanced towards the readers and towards the citizens, not just to the sources. And I think that's very important. So, yeah, we are an independent group. We have a very strong statewide board of directors, but they don't tell us what to say. They don't take policy positions. What they do is they define the scope of the things that we look at and research and work on, and then we supply the research and the policy guidelines, and they let us do that. It's a very unique organization in that respect.
And again, playing a critical role. Now, you touched on it a little bit, but you have this part of your operation that you call the Sunshine Headquarters. Tell us more specifically what that is.
Right. We're involved in so many key public policy areas, and one of those is open records and open meetings, which I think is just vital to trying to operate a really good system. In fact, we're in talks right now with a group here in the state with interest on the local and state level, trying to maybe revise some of our open records laws and try to make them a little more fair and a little more manageable. So, we're always involved in these types of things. Our Sunshine portal is on our website, and you can go to it and get basic information, if you like, about what is our open records laws, what are my rights to go to an agency, either a local or state level, and get documents and get records. And you can also, if you're like really deep into it, like if you're a lawyer or a media person, and we go the extra step. We have Attorney General opinions and a lot of things you can go deep on to really understand these issues. We also have campaign finance information on there, which helps you understand what the do's and don'ts are of campaign finance. So open records and open government has always been a really key part of what PAR has done. We've been very involved in ethics. Back when Bobby Jindal revised all his ethics systems back when he first came into office, we came in later and said, look, we need to fix some things. You made some reforms, but we need to improve and try to fix some of the things that didn't get fixed right, And he said, yeah, let's work with that. And so we put out a report, legislation was passed, and we got some things changed. Years ago, we've worked on a lot of issues related to fiscal policy. That has been a real strength for us, and like pensions, for example. Back in about 10 years ago, we did a really excellent report about what the pension reforms ought to be to try to save the taxpayers money but still be fair to the folks on the pensions and in the systems. And a lot of those were implemented, and a really great track record for us on those types of issues. I could go on and on.
Coastal restoration. I saw a report
yeah,
that you guys
we're not an
recently
environmental group
right.
at all, but what we do is we look at how we're managing the finances, who's making the decisions about these things, what about the contracting, what's the accountability, and how we're doling out the money. We've got billions of dollars in BP settlements. We've got more money coming in from offshore revenue sharing with the federal government. You know, how is this money being channeled? Where is it going? Is it being spent responsibly? Is there a transparent system? And we have a whole program overseeing that. We're not trying to tell people what restoration or protection projects to do. We don't go there. But are we doing it responsibly? Do we understand what the decision-making process is? And are we raiding the coastal fund? That's one of the things we try to make sure we're not going to raid the coastal fund to pay for operational expenses of the state. And that's been part of our watchdog role. When that's happened, we've raised our hands and said, hey, that's what you're doing. Right. Be careful. Don't go there. So that's just one of many things that we've done. We work with healthcare. We work with higher education. We've got a report that we came out with just a couple of years ago on innovation and how we take research and development on the university level and get that into the commercial market. And we had a lot of recommendations in that report. A lot of those have been implemented by the Board of Regents, and a lot of those have been adopted by the universities themselves in trying to do a better job on that front. So I could just name a lot of things that we work on that we've had real impact on.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. I want to jump into the budget, state budget, and this task force that you've been serving on.
You're a brave man.
We're visiting with Robert Travis Scott. He's president of the Public Affairs Research Council. And you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together, good times or bad. And oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors. They're my customers. They're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Robert Travis Scott is our guest. He's the president of the Public Affairs Research Council, PAR. You played a role on a very important task force that Governor Edwards established called the Task Force on Structural Changes in Budget and Tax Policy. It's issued a 71-page final report. It's broken up into 5 sections. The first section talks about Louisiana's fiscal mess. It doesn't mince words. Understanding how we got where we are. If we're going to solve our fiscal problems and not repeat the mistakes of the past, we need to understand how we got here. So let's talk about that first section. But before you do that, give us a brief overview of the process, the group itself, the task force, and the meetings that you've had.
Yeah, well, PAR is on like 4 different physical task forces, but this one is the big physical task force. I call it the task force on the theory of everything. So it's supposed to bring everything together and make big recommendations. It was created by the legislature, Representative John Schroeder, and it got the backing from the Senate President, John Ilario, and Taylor Barra, who is the House Speaker. And they went up to the governor and he said, yeah, I'll buy into it. So they put this group of 13 people together. There are economists on there, former legislator, the Division of Administration, the Revenue Secretary, so on and so forth, and a representative from local government, union representative, and so on. And I was on it. And so we worked for all the way through March through November on this report. And basically we looked at the whole structure of how we do our taxes and a good bit on spending. But a lot of the emphasis we have here, although we do have some good spending recommendations, a lot of the emphasis on doing a new tax structure. And we were supposed to do that for the legislature going into this fiscal session that we have coming up this spring. At the end of January, the task force put out what we call the long report or the final report. It's 70 pages, all right, but it reads like silk, honestly. But I really think
it is well written.
I will say this: if you really want to participate in this discussion, this is required reading, not just because of the recommendations. Even if you don't agree with all the recommendations, this helps explain, not the alternative facts, but the real facts about how we got to where we are, both on the spending front and on the tax front over time. And it helps explain how, we have these locked in, big, long-term, obligatory, mandatory expenses we have every year.
Constitutional and statutory dedication.
Well, that is true.
Right.
But when we look at debt, the
Right.
pension system and all the unfunded accrued liability we're paying for that, the group health system, and a few other things, especially our obligations to the local governments, some of which is very justified money to be spent, but it's a big obligation. And when you look at all these things counted up, the legislature goes into the session to do a budget every year. Most of the money is already spent before they even sit down to work on it. So that's part of what we try to explain and how little flexibility there is on the spending side. The revenue side, there are a lot of themes in here, and I think one of the best things we have in here is an indictment of the current tax system. And there's a chapter in there you can read through and you can really understand why this task force came together, wanted to try to find some solutions. There are so many things wrong with our sales tax, for example. We have the highest combined sales tax rate in the nation, at 10% on average, depending on where you are in the
Combined state and local.
It's combined state and local. But we also have a completely decentralized collection system that's not very friendly to business, and that needs to be worked on. We have like 200 exemptions, and some of those need to be carved back. It's a very complicated system, and it's not necessarily with an outlook the best, probably most reliable tax. And it used to be the sales tax was seen as a very reliable tax, but with spending habits have changed, online sales, people are spending money on things that aren't taxed through the usual traditional retail sales tax, a lot of disposable income going to other types of purchases like services and so on, and buying data. So it's not necessarily the best going forward. So we go through and we explain all that and then try to make some recommendations. We've had exemptions and credits pile up in our tax system also. That's been a real problem. If you look like at the film tax credit, it's increased by a tremendous amount. And the inventory tax credit, companies pay like a property tax on the inventory to the local governments, and then the state pays the company a credit. And this has become phenomenally expensive to the state fisc. And so everybody wants to try to address that. All these problems are sort of summed up, explained, and we try to provide some guidance on where to go from there in this task force report.
You mentioned some of the tax credits, and we got about 30 or 40 seconds left in this segment, that are critically important to business and industry and economic development in the state. And those are things that we have to take a hard and objective look at. In the last 30 minutes or so, I know you and I were talking before we started taping today about trying to reduce uncertainty for business. I know that was a theme that you guys thought about a lot. The 10-year industrial property tax exemption is a big deal for industry as well. Just in 30 seconds or so, your thoughts on creating certainty for business and these incentives?
Well, it has become a very uncertain time because, like you said, the industrial property tax exemption, basically that's being reshaped. Where exactly is that going? How is that going to impact business? What about manufacturing machinery and equipment, the sales tax on that? People are looking at that again. Even though we're stopped paying it, they're looking at it again.
Sales tax on fuels and utilities, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say,
gas,
the utility costs too. What are going to be the taxes on that? Big pieces of uncertainty, plus a lot of credits and exemptions that have been shaved down. Are they going to, take them back up? Are they going to get rid of them? All of this is uncertain right now. Business is in a state of uncertainty, and that's item number one we ought to be dealing with.
We got to think about it. Let's take a break. We come back. Let's start talking about some of the solutions that may be outlined here. We're visiting with Robert Travis Scott. He's the president of the Public Affairs Research Council. And you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you. Build your future at byf.org.
Keene Miller traces its roots to the dawn of the petrochemical industry in Louisiana. As the legal needs of the sector grew, our firm emerged as a leader in environmental law, economic development, real estate, employment, utilities regulations, and more. Today, these same clients and those new to our state continue to rely upon the firm and its attorneys for creative ideas, practical advice, and Louisiana know-how. Industrial strength law. Learn more at KeeneMiller.com.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Robert Travis Scott, president of PAR, is with us. So we sort of set up the issues, right? And it's been a long time coming over a number of years. Unfunded accrued liabilities, pension payments, healthcare costs, things that we don't have any flexibility around. You put on top of that statutory and constitutional dedications. We've really tied the hands of budget makers and priority setters when it comes to the legislature. We've got this tax system from a funding standpoint that's very difficult. Let's begin to talk about solutions in the report. What are we recommending and where do we go?
Okay, the report has a lot of really big solutions. It also has a lot of really small solutions for a lot of little things, which are themselves pretty important. But I would say one of the biggest recommendations it makes is let's take a serious look at the exemptions and credits that we have that are, sort of drawing down or draining down how much we're getting in revenue. See if we can get rid of some of those and then maybe lower the rates a little bit. And that would be helpful. Make a more efficient system. Get some of the clutter out of the way. We have a lot of barnacles on this ship, and it's not moving as efficiently through the water as it should. So even if they don't go in and take one of the recommendations we have, which is to take our sales tax revenue, which is really high right now, and we're very dependent on it, and our income tax revenue, which they used to be bringing in about the same amount of money. Now it's like this, and the sales tax is bringing in a lot more. So we have sort of recommended a little rebalancing of that, bringing down the sales tax revenue, bringing up, the income tax revenue, making it a little bit more progressive. Now, the legislature is not too keen right now on the idea of doing anything with the personal income tax. And remember that it's individual income taxes for you and me, but it's also for businesses. There's some small businesses that file under that. So I understand that. Even if you don't do that, you still could look at a lot of recommendations in here and make some good progress looking at some of these exemptions and credits and looking at a number of the reforms that we have in there. But what about the big picture? If you really want to deal with the structural issues, there are a lot of people talking right now about should we be thinking about a revision of some of these constitutional provisions. I'm not really in favor of going in and doing a full-blown constitutional convention like we had back in 1974. There's not really a crying need, for that, for every section. But there are sections of the Constitution that deal with fiscal issues. There are particular articles, that deal with those. Lots of funds wrapped up, mandatory spending. And I think you could go in and look at those sections and think about revamping those, maybe getting rid of a lot of the restrictions. We've had funds placed in there over the years, and we've had over 120 proposals for changes just on the financial parts alone all over the years. It's become very cluttered, and I think some good work could be done to change the priorities for that.
Sort of stop and clean it out. You and I were talking before we started taping today, and I think during one of the breaks, and I've said this over and over and over on this show and also on the radio show, is that my complete oversimplification of the budget process is we ought to be free to set real priorities and fund them adequately. Let's decide if education is truly a priority. Let's decide if infrastructure development and maintenance is truly priority. Let's fund them and demand excellence from them in a world-class way. And then as we get down to priorities number 200, 250, if there's no money left for those, then we funded the things that we have to get right. What's your big picture perspective on how we've budgeted and used our resources in Louisiana over the years?
Well, I think you've said it, very well. And I think, a lot of what's happened over time is we've just accumulated these new little priorities over time. And, when you look at them and look how they've just stacked up, it would be good to go back and sort of take a fresh look at let's just go back from scratch and see what we do.
Right?
Now, there's some things we're not going to get out of. Our UAL payments to the pension systems, you got to make them.
We're not
going to get out of that. But what you can do is you can look down the road saying, how can we change the system in the future so that we don't have this happen again?
Right.
That type of thinking. So there's another really big, if none of this works, I think there will start to be a lot of conversation about going to a really even bigger change where we look at a state that operates a little bit more like Texas, where you have, say, let's really change the tax structure and spending structure, where it's a lot more based, say, on property taxes. We're not very heavily based on property taxes in the state. Very low property taxes. But that's something that I think a lot of people may be talking about in the future if we don't get much progress this session.
Well, there's a lot to watch for, and it's going to be really interesting to see how much of this report can be implemented. 5 seconds, if people want to look at this report, what should they do?
Well, we're going to have it on the PAR website, even though it's not our publication, the Public Affairs Research Council, but it's also on the Louisiana Department of Revenue website.
You really should read it, and it says in the report, to do nothing is simply not acceptable. Robert Travis Scott,
great.
Thanks for your
Good
time
conversation.
today, buddy.
I appreciate it.
I want to
Thanks
have you
for
back
your work.
on soon, because there's a lot more to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Hey guys, be sure to check out our new LBIS website, www.louisianabusinessandindustryshow.com.